Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. The hard mode version of Orgrimmar Horrific Visions is out as of this week. With 8 masks active, this is an opportunity for players to dive into some very difficult solo content. And I'm somebody who loves to put myself through solo challenges, whether it is the Mage Tower, which you get to clear on every single class and spec in the game, whether it is the boss challenges for Delves in particular, the hard mode editions specifically, or whether it is doing the 8 mask run done for Orgrimmar and eventually I'll do Stormwind. I'm a huge glutton for punishment, and doing this solo was actually one of the hardest challenges that I've done in a very bit of time. Because part of it is an endurance test of managing sanity, but also being able to get through all of the bosses. And I feel like Orgrimmar in particular, especially the Rexar section, is super unfair to so many different classes out there just to get through. Plus the boss itself and the way they interact with masks is actually just brutal if you're not careful. So I wanted to go over my actual run for solo 8 mask Orgrimmar, showcasing exactly what I did, talking about the masks and how I dealt with some of the different mechanics and bosses, and going over my pathway. I did do this as a rogue, so I do have some advantages as a rogue to skip certain enemies, but I still wanted to share with you guys my run in order to help you have an easier time getting through your runs of Vision of Orgrimmar as a solo player. As always, if you guys want to see more Horrific Vision guides in the future or War Within guides, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. You know what? And I might actually leave those words later, but I actually found Vision of Orgrimmar to be much harder than Vision of Stormwind, specifically when it comes to the bosses, or rather specifically one boss of Rexar within Visions of Orgrimmar. But even that whole Rexar area in particular is pretty infuriating to fight through and just play through. It just ended up making it so much harder in my opinion compared to Stormwind, and it feels like Visions are a little bit more challenging on the Orgrimmar side than on Stormwind, not really specifically because of the masks, but rather the encounters as well as some of the unfair combinations and situations you might end up landing yourself into. Before going into my pathing for Orgrimmar and showcasing you the run, I do want to go over the masks exactly and how they're going to impact your run for Vision. So you have to have all 8 masks active in order to get the challenge mode done, and you have a number of masks that could potentially be really bad for your run. The 2 masks I think that are super easy to deal with is Burn Bridge as well as Dark Imagination. Burn Bridge basically spawns void puddles as you move around, so that one isn't bad whatsoever. Dark Imagination just spawns an extra enemy for you to fight whenever you're below 50% sanity. Because of Nemesis, however, the Mask of Nemesis spawns Gammon every 25 kills within Orgrimmar. Gammon doesn't actually do sanity damage. He can stun you, and if you're standing in bad, that can sometimes do sanity damage, but he mostly just hits your health bar, and he does a whirlwind ability. By himself, he's not too terrifying unless he's buffed up by Mask of Vengeance from other enemies that may have died right as you spawn him, but for the most part, he's actually not that bad to fight, and it's basically a free sanity restoration. With us running with low amount of sanity, Gammon essentially just allows us to bypass a lot of the sanity restrictions done by the Mask of Daredevil, which makes us take 400% more sanity damage from attacks, as well as Long Night, which reduces our maximum sanity by 50%. Surprisingly enough, Vision of Orgrimmar actually didn't really feel like a battle against sanity as much. It more actually felt like a battle against your health bar, as enemies in this vision actually hit quite hard, especially in the Rexar area, which at times can feel super unfair to play through. Some of the other masks that I think were also notable is Mask of Multitudes isn't that bad on its own, Mask of Vengeance isn't bad on its own, but Multitudes with Vengeance and Nemesis, that can be a little bit rough. So you have to be very careful watching your counter for how many enemies you're going to be killing before you spawn Gammon. In some cases, I actually went and skipped certain trash bags in order just to kill like 1 or 2 enemies to spawn Gammon by himself before I turn to a trash bag if I can. Me being a rogue made it a little bit easier, but for you, you'll have to be very careful of the kill count as best as possible in order to make sure Gammon doesn't spawn into a really tough enemy trash. Another mask that I thought actually was kind of rough was Pained, as it just creates more madnesses throughout a vision. Madnesses by themselves are like smaller affixes that don't necessarily hurt the run too much. They're more annoying more than anything. Especially in the earlier area, you have madnesses that can potentially increase your damage, even though desync is kind of annoying to play around with against the boss. But things like your entomophobia, which is bugs that you have to jump up and down once in a while in order to clear, but also the fire puddles that you get to spawn, also very annoying, but not detrimental. Where it does become really bad is in the Valley of Honor, where you get split personality, creating kind of like this cage of images that you have to dodge, otherwise they'll disorient you, which can be really bad if you get hit by other mechanics. And then there's another one that also does the circular area, so with split personality, you gotta run out of it, and then there's another one that also has you running out of it. I believe that one is called, I'm not really sure, Hysteria or something along those lines, but that one basically will create a purple circle, hard to see, and if it completes its cast before it run out, it will steer you in a random direction. It is very, very, very difficult in order to... It is very, very difficult in order to try to see if you can fight both of those madnesses while also doing Rexer fight with the knockbacks that it has. So it can be very, very frustrating in some cases. So that mask in particular, I actually think has been the worst. Combining all the masks together, you look at enemies that do 200% more damage and have 200% more health, which makes enemies an actual credible threat within vision. So I was very, very careful to make sure I rotate my defenses in certain areas, and I will go over where are the best places to use offensives and defensives as I do my run through visions. Alright, from there on, I want to talk about the actual run of Orgrimmar. Starting from the very, very beginning of the bat, I'm just going to hug left, making my way towards the Valley of Wisdom. On my way there, I'll find out which potion is the bad potion, which one is the good one, but also I'll check the blacksmith to see if the NPC is there. If the NPC is out and about, you can slay the NPC in order to make your run just a little bit easier, because the NPC grants you 10% damage buff for the rest of your vision, which makes the run so much easier overall, and can potentially make your run just a little bit smoother, as everything is going to die quicker. From there, I actually recommend potentially using invisibility, like an invisibility potion, to skip a lot of those enemies and head over into the Valley of Spirits as soon as possible. You mostly really try to be careful around the gammon timer at the top, so if you're not a stealthy class or not using invisibility, be very, very careful with the gammon, but I found the trash pack at the top of the stairs actually to be kind of difficult on its own. There's another one towards the drag that's also kind of difficult, but I wouldn't burn my defensive cooldowns just yet, specifically. At least, that's just what I wouldn't do. From there, I go into the Valley of Spirits, try to make my way over to the Valley of Wisdom. I'll kill the 4 elementals outside, as well as the elite. The elite is pretty easy to deal with. You just gotta dodge the frontal charge ability. You could just rush him towards the other side of the wall if you want to. After the charge, he does this frontal ability that'll boomerang back to the elite. So you just want to rotate around the elite and then hold your ground until the next charge happens. So you want to dodge the charge, rotate around so you don't get hit by the boomerang ability. From there, you head on to Valley of Wisdom, and you'll pull the very first enemy in order to get your Orc Companion within that area. Companion is kind of a nice word for it, but the Orc Companion there can definitely get you in a bit of hot water, because it sometimes aggro things from super far away without even like trying to attack anything. We'll get into that in just a moment. From there, I think it's a good idea to do a big defensive and offensive pull of elites in front of the big hulking Orc in the Valley of Wisdom. And afterwards, you can do the Orc, which will potentially do a little bit of sanity damage here, as he does toss you around. But if you can chain some of those offensive cooldowns from the trash pack, if you can clean it up very quickly, into the Orc, that'll make that run just a little bit easier. Plus, he's an elite, so that'll help restore your sanity. Going down the ramp, you'll kill a couple of packs down there, but avoid the enemies near the bridge. Those enemies are a little bit too close to the big sacrificial altar, and the Orc Companion in that area tends to pull those packs together for some reason. So the approach of it is actually I go by the water to try to go around it, kill the enemies before the other elite of the area, and then do that elite first before pulling those mobs across the bridge back towards that second elite area. That second elite in particular, by the way, the abilities he does is a big swirly of red that will leave a puddle, and then a shotgun of smaller swirlies that fly out a little quicker that don't leave a puddle. Basically, you just want to rotate around the elite enemy anytime you see red swirlies, or run through him if you think it's going to be a little bit quicker as a melee class, for instance. Afterwards, do a bit of cleanup until you get all the percentages, and then do the boss. The boss itself has a big frontal ability that must be avoided, that will leave a void puddle on the ground, but also swirlies that will summon adds. Dodging the boss, especially his orb ability as a melee, isn't that difficult, and most of his attacks are very, very dodgeable. Where it becomes a little bit bad is the overlaps between madnesses, like split personality in particular. Really, really bad if, let's say, you don't really have a good out, but you're about to get hit by a frontal. Maybe a situation where you might want to use defenses, or if you have any kind of immunity, that could potentially be a really good place to use one. From there, after Valley of Wisdom, I just head into Valley of Spirits, and that place is generally good and easy. You just want to go totem by totem. It's pretty easy to bait out Gammon here for a few sanity refreshers. You do want to try to break up all of those pools as best as possible into smaller pools, just so they're not that difficult. Just go slow and steady, and that area is pretty easy. There is going to be a pretty bad totem. The last totem specifically has a lot of mobs, and all of them are social. So you're going to end up pulling a pretty big pack together. They're not that difficult because they don't have that much health, and some of them are casters, but those potentially could spawn Gammon if you're not watching the kill timer, and that could potentially turn the situation a little bit more grim if you're not careful. But the boss itself is easy, you just gotta dodge the waves, which are pretty generous, as well as do damage to the boss. He'll cast Hopelessness at you twice, I think once at 60%, once at 30% more or less, and all you gotta do is pick up a golden orb in order to remove the debuff, but the boss itself is actually quite easy, and that area isn't all that difficult. From there, I head over to the Drag. Drag is going to have a one big enemy trash pull for you to do before you enter the Drag. A good opportunity for defenses and offensives, and you want to try to chain those offensive cooldowns into the next trash pack in order to clear it quickly. The elite in the Drag area, the first elite, does an orb toss ability, and then he'll do a cast of frontal void beam. Both can be avoided, kind of very similar to the first elite heading to Valley Wisdom. You just rotate around the elite every time he uses an ability. The orb is kind of quick, so you do have to go kind of fast at it, but the rest of the abilities like the beam can be avoided pretty much for the most part easily. Afterwards, in the Drag, it's a bit of a tight corridor, but the enemies are not social. So you should be able to pull them one after another instead of pulling two trash bags together. So try to pull them back towards you and use line of sight in order to get the mobs closer to you, as that can make it a little bit easier for you to break apart those pulls just a little bit more efficiently, because you're going to be getting gammon spawns anyway, so that's going to give you a lot of sanity to work with. You shouldn't be capped by sanity in that area, but if you pull too many enemies, they can quickly become very, very overwhelming. While you're there, check the Transmog building in order to see if you can summon a Ethereal for 10% more crit if that buff is currently active for your run. And also be very, very careful with Gammon summons here. Gammon can be very, very dangerous in the Drag, specifically because there's just a huge number of enemies, and as they die, they'll buff Gammon by a significant bit. So you want to be very, very careful with Gammon summons here and be prepared for it in case things go sour. But the boss in the area is actually very easy. He'll shield himself twice around 60% and 30% mark like the other boss, and all you gotta do is burn some cooldowns, maybe on your trinkets, in order to break the shield. Otherwise you take quite a decent bit of sanity damage. The other ability he has, he'll start a beam, or rather a machine gun style of void attack. You want to kind of get away from the boss and then run in circles to avoid all of those attacks as best as you can. That or burn some sort of immunity just to make sure that you don't need to be running in circles. But if you can avoid those two abilities, break the shield and dodge the machine gun attack, then you should be good to go and able to deal with that one pretty easily. Valley of Honor is going to be the tough area, which I highly recommend you do skips for. It's a very, very tough spot. Lots of very unfair enemies, but off the bat is going to start soft. It's going to just give you Misha, take down Misha, easy elite, easy bit of sanity. From there on though, I really highly recommend using an invis skip potion or something in order to make this place a little bit easier. Many of the packs in there will try to poison you, and when they reach 5 stacks of poison, that will stun you. By itself, that can be a very scary mechanic. Also, the big mobs, the small ones are the ones that are going to poison you, but the big ones that do a charge ability, once they see that you are stunned and poisoned, they will charge at you doing a ton of damage. So unless you have a way for you to be able to clear off the poison effect or just kite the mobs away, that area in its own, you could just die before you even cross the first bridge. It's just that challenging, which is why I highly recommend for you to use potentially Invis Potion and head over right hand side and go into the water, swim by the edge of the void wall and trying to make you all the way there, all the way through towards the jewel crafting building. And you can actually do a bit of jump on the ramp in order to even skip the second elite of the area. Also does a poison attack, also could do a charge ability, also very, 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 very deadly if you're not careful. There's only one trash bag before Rexar, which can be a little tough, but I think it's actually worth sending cooldowns into that one specifically. From there on though, Rexar ain't easier. Rexar is actually, I think, the toughest boss of Orgrimmar out of all of them so far. Not only does he put down traps on the floor immediately when the boss fight starts, which means more stuff for you to avoid, otherwise it will stun you and do a ton of sanity damage, but also periodically he'll summon boars. First he'll summon one of them, then another one, and then 2 at the tail end as they start to fall down one by one. These boars do a charge immediately, which hurts quite a decent bit, but also the charge has a bit of a knockback effect, and then they begin casting spells at you non-stop, which does damage to your health bar and your sanity, and quite a decent bit overall. Boss, for the most part, does melee damage, and at first he doesn't seem that scary, but the board does buff him with vengeance, so he actually gets he starts to hit harder and harder and harder, where every single one of his auto attacks did 1.5 million of my health with all his autos. It is actually so much pressure, so much damage, and you will need a big defensive for this. However, for this boss in particular, I actually decided to do a strat of trying to bank as many orbs as I could, using 1, if not potentially 2 orbs for this boss specifically. 1, because the orbs stop the madnesses in that area, and that's where the bad overlaps can happen. You have this charge, you have these traps, you have these casts, you have this knockback, and you have split personality, as well as the other madness, trying to limit the amount of space you have to work with. It can definitely be very overwhelming, which is why I think dropping an orb to clear the madness so you can do the boards without the madness, just to break it apart a little bit, can make this run just a little bit easier. Plus, the orb will heal you as you're taking damage from Rexxar, and it will restore your sanity if you end up missing a cast or get hit by an ability that does damage your sanity. It at least will help stave off your potential demise here, as this is probably the roughest spot right now of Orgrimmar in particular. Another thing to note for Rexxar, by the way, I guess I completely forgot it, but Gammon can spawn if you kill the boars, as the boars are part of that kill count for Gammon. So you have to be extra careful with how many mobs you kill before the Rexxar. And if you have about 4 or 3, then going into Rexxar, it means you're just going to be spawning Gammon. So if you are in that situation, you may want to potentially slay some other mobs away from Rexxar, spawn Gammon carefully so the Gammon doesn't surprise you on Rexxar fight. In particular, it is actually the worst boss at all. Just the way that it synergizes with masks is just kind of out of control compared to some of the bosses out there. But if you do survive Rexxar at that point, you could go to Thrall afterwards. Thrall is going to embody all the mechanics from all the other bosses, though at a reduced value, and doesn't cast them nearly as often. He'll start out the fight with 2 boars at the very beginning, same boars as Rexxar. You want to kill him immediately. They will also buff the boss with Vengeance, but 2 stacks of Vengeance isn't as bad as 4 stacks of Vengeance. The boss also will have a frontal shockwave ability. Normally it doesn't do much except for does damage to you and hurts your sanity, but because of the boss within the Valley of Wisdom, it now is going to leave puddles on the ground, very similar to that boss's frontal shockwave ability, which means that over time you will have less and less room to work with in the fight. But for the most part, as long as you have decent DPS, you shouldn't really run out of space too badly within the Thrall encounter. His other ability is going to be to leap towards the middle of the boss arena, and then you'll either have an outer part of the boss arena or the inner part of the boss arena be covered in void, and then we'll switch to the other one, whichever one was first, and vice versa. So you just want to be out or in or out, depending on which safe area is safe, while still dodging his frontal ability. Outside of this, he also will cast things like he will shield himself at 50% health, so having some kind of cooldown in order to break through that, or immunity to deny the sanity damage might also be useful there. He also will cast Hopelessness periodically, doesn't seem to cast as often as the boss within the Valley of Spirits, so it makes it a little bit easier to deal with. But if you can get to Thrall specifically, as long as you're not a rogue that presses Vanish by accident like I did, but if you can get to Thrall specifically, he is probably the easiest boss if you play it very, very carefully. The only thing that potentially can hurt you on Thrall is running out of space, but you could also bait his frontal ability to make sure that the void puddles overlap in the same location. In fact, you can do even things like walk Thrall towards a corner of the boss arena, or towards the edge of a boss arena rather, and have the frontal go into the wall to limit the amount of void ground that he creates whenever he does his slam ability. From there, you're just dodging everything available. From there, you're just dodging any of the void on the ground, as well as the inner outer circle void for one of his leap mechanics. But also you're just trying to make sure to have a cooldown available for him whenever he shields himself, and also you want to make sure to pick up a Hopelessness orb whenever that appears. But the boss himself is actually very, very doable. It's just getting to him is very difficult, specifically Rexxar being the biggest hurdle in my opinion. So if you're going to be doing mask runs, I would recommend doing like a 5 or 6 or 7 mask run, and then go into Rexxar immediately just to practice the fight as much as you can, just so you don't end up like me getting 8 masks and then clearing everything, heading to Rexxar, and then dying at the end of it. Just practicing Rexxar, I think, is going to be the hardest, difficult part, but that is going to be made easier over time as you get a couple more hourglass upgrades, like a cheat death ability, but also a damage reduction or damage taken reduction passive that will help make that fight a little bit easier, especially with the board charges and the passive damage you take it from Rexxar. That fight in general is going to be made a little bit easier over time, and for many players, that's going to be your biggest hurdle, in my opinion. But if you can get past Rexxar and make it all the way to Thrall, you're pretty much running to the finishing line at that point. But with that being said, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give it a like. I would very, Very much appreciated. Join our Discord community, especially if you got questions specifically regarding any parts of your solo mask run. I would love to be able to help you guys out, answer some questions, especially if you find yourself struggling in any areas like the Valley of Honor with Rexar area. That spot in particular, and the enemies there, I feel like are super unfair in comparison to every other mob within Visions. But outside of that, I do want to thank you all so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in our next one.